Yumemizuki Mizuki. That's quite an interesting name. Try saying that 5 times fast. Yumemizuki Mizuki, Yumemizuki Mizuki, Yumemizuki Mizuki, Yumemizuki Mizuki, Yumemizuki Mizuki. Oh, that was pretty easy actually. Hey everyone, welcome back to another character analysis video. Today, we're going to be covering Mizuki's kit, her role as an Anemo on-fielder and Swirl buffer, and what else she brings to the table. Disclaimers, timestamps, social media links, and music credits are all down below. So without further ado, let's just get started. Mizuki is going to be an Anemo Catalyst user, and with her and Lanyan's releases being so close to one another, we ended up now having more Anemo Catalysts than we do Hydro Catalysts. Mizuki is going to be an EM scaler, which will be extremely relevant when we talk about her abilities and design. Her basic attacks are all the standard Catalyst stuff, which might help contribute to her swirling capabilities if you have an extended field time, but there's nothing special in terms of unique mechanics in this ability. Mizuki's skill will cause her to enter the Dream Drifter state, where she fires off Anemo shots that deal damage to enemies. In this state, she will also buff the entire party's swirl damage based on her elemental mastery. Since Swirl is already a reaction that scales with EM, this means Mizuki can provide herself and others with a double dipping bonus, one on the character's own EM, and a separate bonus based on Mizuki's. We'll discuss this next part a lot more later, but Mizuki is not able to use basic attacks while in this state. This ability has a base duration of 5 seconds, but it can be extended through her A1 passive. When Mizuki triggers Swirl while in Dream Drifter, she can extend the duration by 2.5 seconds, up to a max of a 5-second extension. This means her effective duration on the ability is going to be 10 seconds. When Mizuki uses her burst, she creates a mini Baku, which continuously makes snacks around the field. When party members touch the snack while above 70% HP, it will explode and deal Anemo damage. If they touch it while below 70% HP, their big mouth instead eats it and heals them based on Mizuki's EM stat. Also, the 5-second rule applies to Genshin food now, so if you wait too long to pick it up, the bacteria gets it, and it'll deal its damaging explosion by default. Finally, her A4 grants a 100 EM bonus to herself when other party members deal Pyro, Electro, Cryo, or Hydro damage. Petch for short. Overall, a good stat for her swirling, swirl buffing, and healing output. It's also super easy to activate and maintain. And while I don't discuss exploration talents as much, I thought this was a pretty cute one, so I'm gonna talk about it. When Mizuki's in the party, there's a chance for healing foods to heal a bit extra, and this chance for each party member increases based on their friendship level. So I, who has the side quest of maxing out all my characters' friendship levels, now has a reason to flex said friendship levels. Yep, every single one. Not including Mawika, Tartaglia, and Lanyan because I'm still leveling those up. Here's a timestamp if you need to skip ahead. Oh, by the way, since Traveler has no friendship levels, they get a guarantee on that extra healing. For everyone who's actually staying for the bit, let's confuse the others. In the comments, talk about your favorite character from a different game. As a general summary of what she's supposed to bring to the table, Mizuki is our first ever Swirl buffer, and technically specializes as an on-field Swirl DPS. Back then, Swirl was mainly used as a source of application on the 4 Petch elements, even for characters who specialized in this reaction. For Anemo DPS units, their Swirls were a nice bonus in damage, but they focused more on their personal output. Similarly to Sucrose and an on-field Sayu, swirling will be Mizuki's main source of damage. And since she's able to buff the entire team's swirl damage, there's options to run a second or even third Anemo unit, which will further improve your team's output. Imagine something like a Mizuki, Sucrose, Venti, and Petch unit team. This would be a great example of a dedicated swirl damage team. Side note on that regard, however, reaction damage can only occur twice per enemy every 0.5 seconds, so the more Anemo units you bring, the more likely their individual swirls will overlap with each other, and this might prevent some instances of damage from occurring. This is a detail to keep in mind if you plan to use these kinds of teams. I find Mizuki's kit as a buffer to be very interesting, because we don't actually have a lot of reaction buffing units. I generally categorize reaction characters in 2 sections, buffer and capitalizer. As I'm sure you've already recognized, buffers improve reactions through their abilities. Right now, we have 3 characters who have reaction buffing in their base kit. Nilou and Kaveh, who focus on bloom, and Baizhu, who improves all Dendro reaction damage. Every other unit who focuses on a reaction falls under the capitalizer category, and these are the opposite of a buffer. Rather than their abilities buffing reactions, reactions will buff their abilities. Fremine uses Shadow to buff his A4's own damage, Kazuha uses Swirl to buff his team's damage, and Chevres uses Overload to apply a Res Shred. These units do nothing to improve the reaction itself, but playing them in teams where the reaction is present improves their own performance. I've been waiting for a very long time for a unit to fall under the buffer category, since that listing is extremely small. Mizuki's swirl buffing is around 0.4% for every point of EM she has, so if you invest at least 1000 EM into her kit, we're looking at a bonus of 400%. In terms of calculations and formulas on an EM-built swirl character, the increase in swirl damage is around 50% better. Onto her role as a healer, she's someone who is an off-field friendly support. So if you're looking to give a different DPS some extra healing, she is a good option. Given that her skill only works when she's on-field, Mizuki will be a bit of a downgrade to other Anemo healers such as Jean, Shanyun, and Sayu, since they provide other forms of utility without being forced to be on-field. And considering her swirl buffing only works when she's on-field, it's extremely likely she'll be the recipient of her own healing. Actually, I forgot to mention this in the earlier part, but when she receives her own healing, that healing is doubled. And with this mechanic, it means her food will deal the damage more than it heals, allowing for more damage output and swirls. Alright, I've gone through most of the stuff that I like about her kit, but power scaling aside, she does have a couple things in her gameplay mechanics that might make or break your decision to pull for her. The main thing is this: while Mizuki is in her skill state, all she can do is move around. She can't use basic attacks, so she's very similar to a Sayu playstyle. This led me to have 2 takes, one that's a factual conclusion, and one that's an opinion. On the factual side, the inability to use basic attacks has a negative effect on synergies, because Mizuki will not be able to proc certain abilities like Xingqiu, Yelan, or Toma's bursts, since those activate upon basic attacks being used. She'll still have a decent amount of units she works with, Xiangling, Oraran, Kaya, Farina, just to name a few. It's understandable to be disappointed that she can't work with certain units, but I don't think the limitation is enough to ruin her kit completely. For my opinion on this mechanic, I just find it kind of boring. I mentioned earlier that her gameplay is very similar to Sayu, but even Sayu has a more active playstyle, since you have the goal of bamming enemies. Mizuki just floats around and her animal puffs happen automatically, so for people who enjoy having an on-fielder who's more active, Mizuki might feel a bit slow in comparison. But I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who will like her gameplay. Genshin has a very diverse player base after all, and a good chunk of players aren't interested in things like combos, elemental gauge theory, or animation cancelling. So if you're someone who enjoys a more simple or comfy playstyle, number 1, you are still valid for that, and number 2, Mizuki will likely be a unit who will fit your interests in that regard. Moving on, the Anemo roster is pretty expansive now, and there's a lot of alternative options when it comes to characters who fulfill a similar role to Mizuki. So for this section, I'm going to briefly discuss some of the other on-fielders, when you might choose Mizuki, and when you might choose other options. Obviously, Mizuki's going to be the best option if you want Swirl damage to play a massive role in your team output. Taser and Aggravator are among some of the more popular teams for Swirl comps, since the reaction can also provide uptime on these reactions. She will be relatively easy to play compared to others. Where other characters might need to consider certain combos while also dodging, Mizuki's fly-only state means you can focus primarily on avoiding enemy attacks. She'll function perfectly fine with automatic attackers like Furina, Yai, or Xiangling. And as a side note for team experimentation, I want to try using her more in dual or multi-Anemo scenarios versus solo Anemo, so that Swirl output can be maximized a little bit more. On-fielding Sayu is going to have very similar teams with automatic versus coordinated attacks, so deciding between these two is going to be more on their utility. Triggering Sayu's burst and a 1 passive allows for extra healing, while Mizuki has healing in her own kit, it's limited to the active character. So Mizuki's going to have more value on swirls, while Sayu has better value in team healing. This can be through easier stacking on Furina's fanfare, or maybe when your entire team is experiencing damaging effects. Also, as mentioned before, Sayu's more interactive with her collision objective, so if you want a more engaging unit, she is an alternative in that aspect as well. When it comes to on-field Sucrose and Heizo, I'd personally use them when I need a driver focused on reactions. Drivers in Genshin are usually referring to units with the capacity to trigger off-fielders' abilities, so it would be coordinated attacks with a normal or charge attack trigger, like Xingqiu, Toma, or Beidou. These two also work better for team-related EM buffs. Sucrose is better if you're looking at reactions being the main source of damage, since her kit is very EM and EM sharing focused. Meanwhile, Heizo's more your cup of tea if you enjoy his DPS/driver hybrid playstyle. General on-fielders like Xiao, Wanderer, and Chaska are obviously better suited for personal damage over the Swirl reaction. Finally, Lanyan is an option for on-fielding, since her A4 has EM synergy. I believe the main incentive here is if you need a driver alternative, but with some defensive utility over buffing potential. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this Mizuki analysis. In terms of her kit utility, I'm extremely happy that we're getting new reaction buffers instead of the usual capitalizers. While her numbers may not be meta-breaking, her kit's mechanics create a sort of reimagining of the potential Swirl has. Instead of mainly being a supportive reaction, she creates buffs to shift it into more of a damaging reaction. Her playstyle as a less engaging Sayu is a bit of a low point for me, since I do believe on-fielders should take more of an active approach in their role. Still, she will be a solid option for those who enjoy a cute or comfy playstyle, and you can rest assured that her team options are still very flexible to work around. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to support the channel. And let me know in the comments whether you'll be pulling for Mizuki or just skipping and waiting for a standard pull. Also, let me know what kind of crazy or creative teams you're interested in trying out with her. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!